Hey, gorgeous! Welcome to the Business Mindset Podcast with Holly Wharton, which combines powerful strategies on how to upgrade your business mindset along with practical business tips to grow your business. This podcast features solo shows with Holly and also interviews with inspiring women entrepreneurs from around the world. Thank you so much for joining us today. And now, here's your host, Holly Wharton.
Hello and welcome to the Business Mindset Podcast, episode 145. This is your host, Holly Wharton. I'm here with today's special guest, Shannon Ledford. Shannon is the host and creator of the Honor the Feminine podcast. She believes deeply that when we connect and inspire each other, we can all soar together. She's healing her old story around women not supporting each other and highlighting the amazing people, especially women, in her life and their stories around sisterhood and the wisdom of their intuition and how they nurture their relationship with the feminine. Welcome, Shannon.
Hi, Holly. Thank you for having me. I'm excited about today.
And me too. Woohoo. So why don't you tell us a little about your background and your business journey and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. Yeah. So I grew up in a small town in California. And I always start there because it was one of those kinds of places where at 18, I couldn't wait to get out of the small town that I felt like couldn't contain me. And now I love going back there. So I always sort of start there. And my journey from there was to, university, and then I went to law school. So my first venture out into the corporate world was as a corporate lawyer in Manhattan.
Wow.
So, yeah. So for me, that played really well to me, really leaning into my masculine, right? Mm-hmm. The charging forward, pulling things along, making things happen. And I have a lot of that energy. So that fit me really well. Mm-hmm. But it also really drained me. And so to feed both sides of myself, after doing that for about 2.5 years in Manhattan, I picked up, and a friend and I bought an 84 Land Cruiser in Durban, South Africa, and spent 9.5 months driving through Southern and Eastern Africa. Yeah. And that was the catalyst to about 6 years of being a travel photographer. Ooh. So I would go out and I'd take a new body of work, and then I would sell my work as fine art in California through art festivals. Ooh. And I loved that time. I loved that time in my life. But it also then got to a point where it played itself out. I remember my last trip in 2009 to India, and I remember thinking at the end of that trip that the way in which my life had been the last 6 years was wonderful, but it was shifting again, and I could feel the ground shifting,
Yep. I know exactly what you mean.
So I actually spent so during that time, I had found a spiritual teacher about 11 years ago now, and he was running an ashram program in the mountains above Asheville, North Carolina. And so I went and spent 6 months meditating and working on the ashram. Yeah. And in that time, I actually connected with my husband. And so we now live in Asheville, North Carolina. And as that happened, I actually thought I wanted to do some lawyering. I don't even know if that's really if you can even say lawyering. I want to do some lawyering here in Asheville. And so I took the bar here because I had not practiced in a while, and I needed to do that to get certified. And I was going to start my own law firm. And I got the feeling. And I knew myself well enough at that point to know that I needed to really heed that warning. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up working with a company that does whole food supplements and vertical gardening systems.
I love those gardening systems. I was checking out your website and I was like, oh, those are cool.
Thank you. Yeah. So we grow vertically here on these amazing gardens at our house. And the whole idea behind the company is to inspire healthy living around the world by getting more fruits and vegetables into people. Mm-hmm. And what that created for me was gathering this beautiful, amazing group of women to work as a team together around this. And I found a lot of success with this. But in those first couple of years of that business, I've been doing that about 4 years, I got to the point where I hated it. I was dragging it along. I was doing it in the way in which I was bringing the energy from the corporate lawyering into this.
Yeah.
And it just felt draining. Yeah. And I thought, I loved the business and I loved what I was doing and I loved the women that I was working with, but I didn't love the way I was going about my business. And so I connected with a really old friend who we'd both worked in corporate America in New York all those years ago. And I started to delve into the feminine. And for me, the podcast has grown out of that. And honoring the feminine for me is about bringing my life back into balance. It's not about the feminine being better than the masculine or all of these things. It's about, I had leaned so heavily that I needed to really start to honor the feminine to bring myself back into balance. And what it's brought to me is a lot more joy in my business, a lot more fun and play. And in all of that, my business is growing more now than it was even before.
So would you say this was a major mindset shift for you in your business, shifting from working with that masculine energy to working with the feminine energy?
Yes. And there have been a lot of bumps along the way, as you can imagine. There are those moments where I'm like, it's not moving fast enough. I know how to make it move faster. I'll drag it along, and I'll achieve with it. And what it really has done, I think a mindset shift is the perfect way to put it, because it's creating, for me, I can step into being a better woman, a better mother, a better wife, a better friend, a better leader in all of this. And that's the gold in all of this, right? Like, the business is just the vehicle for all of this to happen, right?
Yeah, I think it's interesting how business can bring up all of our stuff and force us to really take a look at the stuff that we really need to be working on.
I think most businesses, or most people that are successful in business, have taken the time to really do the self-work.
Yes.
I think if we really looked at it, you would find that that's the case. Because leaders do that.
Yeah.
If you'd asked me 4 years ago, I would have told you, yep, I'm pretty much, I'm innately a leader. And I still believe that to be true. But I had no idea how much I have to learn, right? And the leaps and bounds over the last 4 years have been amazing. And the biggest thing I've learned is how much more I have to go.
Yes, yes. And I'm sure how you're leading now is very, very different from how you were leading 4 years ago or before.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, some of it is about not filling all my time, sitting back and letting things, I think the divine works through our intuition. And so when I was a lawyer in New York, there really wasn't any value put on that. So I sort of set that to the side. I mean, I believe she was always there, but that, that voice, that intuition had gotten muffled because she wasn't valued.
Not only that, but if you're always like pushing, going, achieving. It's like you're on this, kind of treadmill towards success, but in a way where you don't have that much time to kind of sit and let that intuition pop in and give you those downloads of information.
Absolutely. And because the sitting and allowing isn't valued, you don't do it.
Yeah.
And so when I got out in the world, when I started the traveling, the stress of that day to day and the go, go, go. I mean, I went from go, go, go Manhattan to we like to say like contemplating my belly button in Africa, you know, like it was like that. But it created all this time, and I started to hear her again.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It is so beautiful when you can finally hear that voice of intuition and be like, where has this been all my life?
Right? Like, where have you been all my life? And yet, I will say, I then had a difficult, or it felt a bit of a struggle to bring that back into the day-to-day when I got back to the States, right? There was still that conflict, right? For me. And so that's part of what's being resolved now.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how do you bring that intuition into your day-to-day life and business now? How have you found the way to kind of tap into that?
You know, I go about it in a few ways. I go about it in some small ways and then in some big ways. So like small ways are, so before we started today and before I sit down to work in the morning, I will pick a goddess oracle card to sort of join me for the day.
Oh, I like that.
Like what message is coming along today? Mm-hmm. So actually today was SIG for quiet time. So for me, that means that I need to carve out some time today to really sit. I'm bringing up this new program, this new mentorship program for my team. And it hasn't quite downloaded to me yet. Mm-hmm. And I know that I need to carve out some quiet time. And so I take that as an indicator, just an extra indicator of that. So a little bit of that to touch into myself. On a bigger scale, you know, meditation, and that was part of the ashram practice and part of the spiritual teacher. A big component of that is meditation. I find when I get away from my practice, I get away from myself, and I start living on the surface again, you know, completely, and not being integrated all the way through. And so that's a big difference. I know it's a big trend now, at least here in the States, the adult coloring books.
Oh, yeah.
I have been doing that actually for a number of years. And when I used to get back from traveling, I'd color for a while to figure out what my color palette was going to be for my next body of work.
Oh, I like that.
But now I'll find myself coloring. Now, mind you, I have a 2.5-year-old, and you would think, we can color together. No. Because she still wants to come over and like draw on mommies, and you know, and then I have to say things like, "Oh my God, can nothing be just mine?" And so, but yeah, something like that to just get out of myself. We got rid of television a couple of years ago, and that was one of the ways that I really like vegged out, you know, and I would do it for too long. It was one of those places where where it felt like for the amount that I was doing, I was wasting time. And so I delve more into books now, you know, so there's just a number of small changes that we've done consistently here and that I've done consistently that then, you know, make a big difference. So like for my team call every week, we pick a goddess card as an inspiration for the week.
Yeah, I love that. Love it.
It's just a small little dose of magic.
Yeah, and kind of gives you a little focus for your energy for that week. So, Shannon, let's talk a little bit about how women can nurture their relationship with the feminine and how that can help their business. Because I think a lot of us do come from, even if we haven't had like highly masculine careers like law, a lot of us do operate from the masculine because that's what we've learned and that's, you know, what we've been taught and that's what we've experienced. So how can women nurture this connection and relationship with the feminine? Because that's kind of a hard thing to get into sometimes.
Yeah, I think it is. So I can only really speak to my journey with it, and I can do that. So I think sometimes, at least for me, my thought was, the feminine just sits back and there's no action involved in it. And that's not the truth at all. Like, it's not that the masculine's action and the feminine's not in any way, shape, or form for me. What the feminine is about for me is timing and creating some space and time to listen so that when we act, the timing's right, so that we're in sync with the waves, right? So if you're in the ocean and a wave's coming, with the feminine, you sort of wait for it to come so you can ride it.
Flow.
And sometimes flow. And sometimes with the masculine, I was trying to like grab that wave, right? And and I was doing it because I needed to get this done and I should do this and I should do that. And these are the recipe things that I have to do in this timing to be successful. And, see the air quotes, successful. So that's been the biggest thing. And it is a challenge for me, but I can now feel it in my body. I can feel it in my body. For me, it happens to be a tingling between my shoulder blades when this is the right action, this is the right time, go. But I always thought of it as like sitting back and not action oriented, the feminine that is, and that's just not the case for me. It's very much about action.
Yeah, but it's a very different kind of action.
And it's a different angle of approach to the action.
Yeah.
Right? So like in New York, as a lawyer, it was like, these are the deadlines and you go, and you this and that. There's a way in which if we'd sat back a little bit and let things percolate a little, we probably could have done less work more easily.
Exactly.
But in the land of billable hours, efficiency and that isn't, you can't bill for coloring.
Yeah. You can't bill for just sitting back and meditating and letting your downloads come in.
No, that's it. It's really the downloads. And again, I still find myself, I mean, it's not like, oh, I've healed this and now everything's great and I listen to the feminine all the time. No, it's a process for me. It's a process.
It's a learning process. You keep getting better at it the more you practice it. But I think we always kind of need to be reminding ourselves of how it is that we want to function.
Absolutely. And that goes actually to the podcast a bit, in that the podcast for me is about healing that old story that women don't support each other, that we're catty and mean. And as I know that not to be true now.
Yeah.
But I was reluctant to shift that story or to believe that, right?
Yeah, I think when women are operating from the masculine, we tend to be catty. And I think that sounds wrong, because I think people think of that catty kind of competitiveness as being a feminine thing, but I don't think it is. I think that happens when women are functioning from the masculine. Because I think when we're functioning more from the feminine, like you've said, things flow, and I think it's easier for us to work together and support each other.
I hadn't quite put it together like that, Holly, but that feels right on point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because I used to have the same kind of attitudes about women as well. I always felt like it was easier for me to get along better with men, and it was easier for me to work with men. Men were just so much easier. They were just very straightforward, whereas women are so complicated. I had all these screwed up beliefs about women. But it's like, now that I'm mostly working with women and I'm surrounded by other women entrepreneurs and I'm interviewing them for my podcast, and I'm like, my life is all about women now. I'm just like, women are so beautiful. We all support each other. We're so lovely, and it's so fabulous. And it's a totally different perspective.
It absolutely is. And my journey was very similar to yours. And one of the first things that had to shift for me was the idea from scarcity to abundance.
Yes.
That you and I aren't fighting for the same thing, that there's plenty for everyone, and everyone's is going to look a little different, and it's all great, right? So that we can work together so that we both achieve.
Yes.
And that felt gorgeous. And it's not that this doesn't come up. It's not that like, now everything's rainbows and unicorns and I love every woman and we all resonate. No. But when that energy comes up, when that lack of support or meaner cattiness sort of rears its head, my relationships change with it. So instead of saying, see, I told you, I knew that's how it is. This is just another example. I say now, oh, wait a second. What happened there? Did I miscommunicate? What went on between me and this woman? How can we clear this and move forward? Right? And we don't have to be best friends moving forward. But, it's not going to just go away. Our stories, they don't completely dissipate, but our relationship with them can shift dramatically. And that's the part that actually we are in charge of. Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
I'm not, it's not about changing how the women in my world act. It's about calling in the women, right? It's like the masculine would try to change, who's here and make them act a certain way. Mm-hmm. And the feminine just starts to call in amazing women into your life. And the podcast has been a beautiful playground for that.
I love that. So how have you seen that nurturing your relationship with the feminine has helped your business, and how have you seen it help the businesses of other women?
So for me, it's that angle of approach of enlivening the leader within each of us. So within my business, each woman owns her own business, right? So you work for yourself, but not by yourself. Mm-hmm. And as each woman has more success, everyone has more success. And it's a gorgeous model for that, of working together. And I just believe that there's a leader within each of us, and that it just needs to be enlivened. Mm-hmm. And again, that the business is a vehicle for that, for enlivening the leader and the beautiful divine woman in each of us. And those that are on this journey with me and continuing to be called into this journey with me, the business journey, are stepping right into that. Now, at the beginning of this, it spun some people off, right? Who just weren't ready to move into this space. Mm-hmm. But I just really knew that I needed to, for my business to grow, for me to grow. And so I was willing to do that, regardless if there were some consequences of that for those that just weren't ready. And that's okay. Because I knew I was going to call in. And I got reminded from some very good friends on a regular basis that they would happen. You do question, or I did question. But now there's this core group of us that's just continuing to call in women that are ready to step into their journey, to step into themselves, and to impact the health of their families and communities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a feminine way.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. So can you tell us a little bit more about your business? So we talked a little bit about the Tower Gardens at the beginning. Can you tell us a little bit more about kind of the products that you work with and what your business is like?
Yeah. So the mission behind the company is to inspire healthy living around the world by getting more fruits and vegetables into people. So what we do is we actually juice fruits and vegetables and then dry them at low temperatures. So the enzymes are still there. Yeah. So you're getting raw fruits and vegetables in a capsule or chewable form. And so the idea is that none of us get enough fruits and vegetables, right?
And fruits and vegetables don't have the same properties that they had 50 years ago. So it's like we've got to eat more than we ever needed before.
And you're so right about that. I mean, I don't know about you, but growing up here in the States, it used to be eat your 5 a day. And now it's eat your 9 to 13. And part of that is because the soil's depleted. Yeah. But the bigger part is that it's coming normally from so far away that it is picked. And that's when the nutrient value, like you don't get any more nutrients at that point because it's not in the soil anymore. Yeah. So that tomato that's picked green, it'll ripen, but it doesn't get any more nutrient dense. So it's all nutrient deficient. And so we need so much more of it. Yeah. And so this just bridges the gap between what we get and what we need. And it just allows us to do that in an easy way. So for me, when I found this, I was excited about it because I'm going to be 41 this week. And I have a 2.5-year-old daughter. So thank you. Wednesday, tomorrow. Oh my gosh, today's Tuesday. So I knew I was going to be an older mom. And I was carrying around that story that people had put on me a bit about, oh, you better hurry up. It takes, fertility goes down. Like I was always really healthy, but I was carrying around this weight on my shoulders.
Yeah.
So when I came across something that could help naturally nourish my body and bring it into balance, and I saw what was going on with pregnant women and the product, I was like, I need that in my life. Mm-hmm. And it helped to lift some of those stories again. And again, my life seems to be all about bringing things back into balance, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what it really does is you get more fruits and vegetables, it brings your body back into balance, right? Mm-hmm. You get more feminine when you were leaning into the masculine, it brings your life more into balance. And what I found early on is that getting 30 fruits, vegetables, and berries every day, mm-hmm. I had more sustained energy throughout mm-hmm. the day, and we got sick less. My whole family. Yeah. And that was beautiful. And see, people will said to me, but Shannon, you always have had a lot of energy. And what they didn't realize is, I would go out in the world, and I would project a lot of energy. I'm an extrovert and all of those things. But I would come home, and I would have an empty tank, mm-hmm. right? Like, lay flat on the couch, like, oh, okay, I'm drained now. And I don't have that anymore.
That's lovely. I think that's so, I think that's so important, because if you're just, again, pushing and just giving all that energy out, but you're not replenishing it in any way, that's just completely exhausting.
Yeah, and how we fuel our bodies matter.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So Shannon, do you have any women business mentors? Are there any women entrepreneurs who inspire you, who maybe are working more with that feminine energy?
Yeah. So I have two mentors in my life. One is Sora No. Sora is who I talked about we knew each other 15 years ago when we were both in corporate America and have walked sort of parallel paths through traveling through the world. Mm-hmm. Sora has a beautiful ability to she has a beautiful vision about business and steps and action steps to moving forward. But she also is very rooted in the feminine and the magic and the power of sisterhood and circle. Mm. And the combination of all of that has really helped my transformation into being more successful and more fulfilled by what I do. And so she's really incredible. Mm. So, and she's here in Asheville now, which just makes it exciting for me because we get to actually see each other, which is really fun. But sometimes I wonder, in those moments when I wonder, can this really work with the feminine, mm-hmm. right? I look to her because she's modeled it so gorgeously mm-hmm. and continues to progress and grow, which I just love. So Sora. And then there's a woman named Catherine Lee. Mm-hmm. And Catherine's a motivational speaker. She runs something called The Ultimate Source. And Catherine is one of those women who loves and empowers women. Mm-hmm. And so she has a lot of beautiful tools to help get in touch with yourself in a deeper way. And I love working with her too. They've actually both been on my podcast. Sora was actually the first episode of my podcast, and Catherine was more recently, and she and I talked about the path from comparison to compliment. Because one of the things that's up for me right now is noticing how much time and energy I've spent comparing myself and seeing if I measure up mm-hmm. to others, in particular other women. Yep. And it's a pattern that it's a pattern I no longer serving me. Yeah. So
yeah, I think a lot of us have gone through that or are currently experiencing it. Definitely. Yeah. So Shannon, where can people find you online, either for your podcast or for your business, or both?
Well, the podcast, you can get us at honorthefeminine.com. Mm-hmm. And you can find all our episodes there. And the women are amazing, and I feel so blessed and honored to have them join me on that project. And then you can get my other business at sledford.juiceplus.com.
Okay, perfect.
And there's a tab there where you can click on Tower Garden if you want to see the vertical gardening system.
Okay, great. And so that's got both the supplements and the gardens.
Yep.
Good. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I had such a great chat with you around feminine energy. I think this is such an important topic for women to be aware of and be discussing, and it was just a pleasure to speak with you about this today.
Holly, thank you so much for having me. I had so much fun with you.
Good. And thank you for listening. And remember to visit hollywharton.com/145 for the show notes on this episode. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Business Mindset Podcast with your host, Holly Wharton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed at hollywharton.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to head over to iTunes and leave a quick review of this podcast. It just takes a minute. Thank you.